I loved watching that video, and I just have to give a shout out to all the women in the audience. You must be very tough women. And I was watching, seeing some pink hard hats in the video. It actually took me back to my IBW days where I was with our international president visiting a job site, and they were expecting about 10 of us, and they had all these hard hats laid out. I was the only woman. And there was one pink hard hat. And our international president was colorblind. So he picked up the pink one, put it on, and no one said anything. So I just put the other hat on, and he wore the pink hard hat the whole job tour. So, but I just want to say it's an honor to be here today. And following the speakers that I've seen from yesterday, unbelievable, with Rich Trumka and of course Terry O'Sullivan and now Dennis, and we saw Harold this morning. I just want to thank you for the honor to be here to bring greetings again from the AFL-CIO, from 12.5 million working men and women, 55 unions in our umbrella. And I want to thank Harold for sitting at that big table of the AFL-CIO and for your leadership. And it's just been an honor working with you. And thank you so much, too, for recruiting Dennis into our movement. I think with 3 proud generations of longshoremen. However, I don't think you had much of a choice, Dennis, right? It's the family business. And we're so glad that you chose this path. To my fellow Secretary-Treasurer, Stephen, thank you so much for your leadership as well. It's good to be in your company and learning from you. Secretary-Treasurer work can be pretty thankless, right? But to the entire Executive Council, your entire leadership team, delegates, leaders, activists of this great union, thank you, thank you, thank you for your activism and the role you play in our broader labor movement. I loved being in Puerto Rico with you 4 years ago. I cannot believe it was 4 years ago already at your convention, and so it's an honor to be back and seeing what is going on in Puerto Rico right now. What's happening on the island is incredible, the tenacity that the people of Puerto Rico are showing. And it just reminds me that the ILA makes this country move. And makes this globe move. And we should never take your work for granted. And there's this story of rugged individualism we hear about often in the United States, right? Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But we know in the labor movement, you are stronger when you stand together. And no one knows this better than the ILA. And Dennis talked this morning about some history. And a name you know well, Jeff Davis, I think said that ILA stands for I Love America. And that was rooted in a deep patriotism. And I travel a lot for my job. I know you all do too. And I get to meet working people all across this country. And to this day, I would say that nobody is more proudly patriotic than the ILA. It is simply who you are. It is in your DNA, and we're grateful for that. And I come out of the IBEW, as was said, the electrical workers. And speaking of patriotism, I'm the daughter of a Vietnam veteran. My father was a Marine. I guess once a Marine, always a Marine, right? He came back from Vietnam looking for a job and went down to the local utility company. And only through first becoming a hole digger, making peanuts, then getting into the apprenticeship to become a power lineman was he able to provide for our family. And I'm extremely proud of that. My dad was a 37-year member. And Enron, anybody remember the name Enron, the company? Came in basically and bought the power company that I worked at, my dad worked at, my mom worked at. And this company drove our little local utility company into the ground when it filed for bankruptcy. My dad worked 37 years and was getting ready to retire. And you all know when you work physically demanding jobs, you don't work 50, 60 years, right? So he was getting ready to retire and watched his retirement shrink from dollars to dimes overnight when Enron filed for bankruptcy. And that traumatized me, and that was what inspired my activism, really, is to watch what our family went through when retirement security was at risk. And in this country, retirement security is increasingly at risk. And this is what we fight for every single day, to protect for our members, right? The dignity to retire after a career of hard work. And labor solidarity really is what keeps us strong. And I think that's the message that I've taken away from this morning. And the ILA defines the word solidarity. And I saw this firsthand a few years ago after Hurricanes Harvey and Irma and Maria came through. And your members who always step up in times of crisis, right? And I specifically remember in Puerto Rico, you filling two 40-foot containers outside the training center in New Jersey with generators and batteries and blankets and food and you name it, it was probably in there. And those containers, I know, were donated by Integrated and CNC Company. And it was through that partnership and that incredible solidarity that you were able to come to members in need and folks on the island who were in their moment of crisis. And you do it time and time again. And I think on top of that, you were raising money. Was it $200,000 you raised to donate to the victims of those hurricanes? So that is what being in the labor movement is all about. And it's not just about getting a job done and calling it a day and going home. It's about caring for your fellow members and our communities. And it's about making life better, not just for ourselves, but for our families and our friends and our neighbors and coworkers. And Rich Trumka mentioned yesterday that for the first time in a long time, people are seeing the labor movement as relevant to them, even if they're not in a union. That labor is at a 20-year high in terms of popularity and folks relating to the labor movement. And so if you've seen the news lately, it's not hard to figure out why. Workers are speaking out and taking risks like we haven't seen in years. Teachers from Arizona to West Virginia walked out for the respect that they deserve. Unite Here members at Marriott, hotel workers, their slogan, "One job should be enough." Doesn't that just capture it? They walked off the job and they said, "We want the right to negotiate over technology." Similar theme, right? And how it impacts their jobs. UFCW, Stop and Shop. Anybody from New England? Few people. Okay, you know the grocery stores. They were out on strike. They quickly brought the corporation back to the bargaining table because the customers were standing side by side with them and said, "These are the people who serve me in my store every single day. They deserve respect. They deserve dignity and fair wages." So they walked out and the company came back to the table after a couple weeks, right? So it's not just union members, though, that are saying enough is enough. We're seeing workers in places where unions are desperately needed, like in the tech sector rising up. You probably saw Amazon. Anybody follow what happened on Prime Day last week? Some of you might have been shopping, but you know, Amazon fulfillment centers are the modern day sweatshop. Employees at one of those warehouses in Minnesota said, "You know what? We're gonna walk out today to call attention to these conditions that we're working in. Can't even take a bathroom break because they're making quotas," right? So what about Google workers? You think Google? You think union? Not yet. But Google saw employees staging a worldwide protest last fall demanding an end to workplace harassment. They're doing what unions have done forever, right? They walked out. And get this, video game developers. Anybody in here play video games? You're probably afraid to raise your hand, right? So maybe your kids play video games. Do you know that video game developers are actually working to deliver games in what they call crunch, where they're working 16 to 18-hour days with no sleep, no ability to really eat or, again, go to the bathroom, the very basic human necessities? Do you think they need a union? Absolutely. These are the same kinds of workplace issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that are happening in the technology sector. They need a union just like us. So that's right, working people are standing up. They're standing up together and demanding fairness and justice and respect. And we in the labor movement need to ask ourselves, what can we do to be relevant to these emerging industries where there are no unions, where workers need a voice? We need to ask ourselves, how are we going to reach these people who are organizing? They're organizing all around us, but they're not connected to us in the labor movement. They want to join us, but they just don't know how. They don't know the next steps. And how do we grow our unions in emerging industries that have no union footprint? Do you think there are going to be some new tactics, some new ideas, some new approaches, right? We need to experiment. We need to figure out what's going to appeal to the workers in those industries, especially as work is changing. Is work changing? Absolutely. It's changing all around us. And technology is changing the way we do our jobs and the way we communicate for sure. But too often, and I think Harold can relate, you hear these conversations about future of work, right? And there's think tanks and academics and foundations and corporations and Congress, they're all talking about future of work. But there are no workers at the table to talk about a worker perspective on the future of work. That is insane, right? We need a seat at that table. Do you think working people have ideas about what the future of work should look like? Absolutely. And do you think we should have a voice in bargaining how technology impacts our jobs? Okay, that you should all say yes. Yes. Come on. Absolutely. We need a voice in how technology impacts our jobs, because the old saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And these are the things that, when I say technology, people kind of go, ooh, it gets a little like fuzzy and like, what is she talking about? But we need to be talking and thinking about these issues, and I don't think we do it enough. And frankly, we need to take a page out of the ILA's playbook, and the same guide that helped you secure that groundbreaking master contract last fall. Let's give another hand for that contract. Harold and the ILA have handled the impact of technology and automation head-on, right where it needs to be tackled, and that is at the bargaining table. And that is exactly where we want to see this go in the future. And this is the new frontier for the labor movement, folks. We have been bargaining over technological change since the beginning. If you think about technological change, it's not just about computers, right? And tech itself isn't necessarily inherently good or evil. It's how it's used and the choices that we make around it, and whether working people are going to get their fair share of the benefits of technology. That's right. And what we won't stand for is for technology being used to deny working people their rights. We're not going to stand by and let technology used to cast aside working people without a path forward to better jobs in the future and the benefits of technology being shared with us. So we have to be at the table. We have to be in the room to capture those benefits and create a dynamic and modern labor movement as well that gives workers the power in this rapidly changing economy. But shaping the future of work is only one step. And if we want to grow our movement, what do we need to do? Organize. Organize, organize, organize. And in order to do that, we need to fix our labor laws, don't we? We know today it takes an act of heroism to form a union because of all the opposition we face and the labor laws in this country being broken. You heard about the PRO Act? Yeah, it's a trick question. Everyone should know about the PRO Act. Rich talked about it yesterday. And this bill is perhaps the most important bill in our generation. The PRO Act would protect the right to organize and form a union. The right to form a union. And it's the bill that we have been waiting for, and we have to do everything in our power to make sure it becomes law. So when you get back home and you talk to your friends and your family and your neighbors, talk it up, and then call your member of Congress and tell them to sign on as a co-sponsor of the PRO Act and obviously vote for the PRO Act. This is a big deal because with the PRO Act, we have a real shot at changing the future for working people. It is going to help us fend off the relentless attacks on our rights at work. It would repeal right to work. This bill would repeal right to work nationally. You could get that done with one stroke of the pen. And once the PRO Act is signed into law, I'm being optimistic, we'll have the momentum we need to fight back the other anti-worker attacks that we're seeing, like gutting the Jones Act and defeating the anti-worker, anti-American port protection bills that have no place in our country. And the ILA is leading us forward. You're preparing workers for the future. You bargained that landmark master contract that we've heard so much about. And you take risks as America's first line of defense at our nation's ports. And this union has always put country above anything else. From port to port, you have made people's lives better. And that is the goal that our entire labor movement is working toward. We have a lot of work to do, but I like our chances, don't you? That's right, because our movement is changing. And with the ILA leading the way, we're getting stronger, we're getting bigger, we're getting more powerful, more popular with the public, and we're showing America that when we stand together, we win together. Thank you, ILA. Global power.
Right here,